Money. I'm going to introduce him in a minute, but before I do that, let me just tell you that, whatever you are, if you are on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn, if you're here with us inside AirMeet, say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from, what kind of situation you are in right now, because we want to make this very, very interactive. We want to make sure that all your questions are answered here, right? So I see Manny's already in the chat, so that's very good, Manny. So one thing I'm going to do, right, especially for our friends that are not here on AirMeet, let me just put the link here. If you want to join us here and have direct contact with everyone around here, how about you just, how about you come here for this URL right here, right? The conversation with friends. So get on this QR code right there, or on this link, on this short link right there. Join us here. I see Mokhtar from Morocco is here with us. So come on, everyone, come here with us, and we're going to have this awesome conversation with Manny here, and we're going to discuss artificial intelligence. We're going to discuss, how to be a freelancer. We're going to discuss how to learn fast and experience, how to lead crazy development world here that we live right now. So join us, and without further ado, let me introduce you guys to the great Manny. So Manny, he is a freelancer in the UK, right? One of the leaders of the London Java community, right? It's one of the most important community user group in the world. He's also coordinator of the artificial intelligence track on TDC, the Developers Conference, that's going to happen next week. So, hey, Manny, so good to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Bruno. Likewise, great to be here. It was a pleasant surprise when you messaged me to come and join this session. So great. I like what you're doing, and you've got so many people involved, and in such a short period of time. Do you do this for a living, or is somebody pays you for this? Because I wouldn't have the time and the ability to do all of this, and somebody paying me for it. But of course, that's not what we developers do, right? We sit behind the computer and write a lot of code.
Well, I'm a consultant like you, right? So,
okay.
So we have to figure out ways to make our own money, right?
All right. Okay. So you definitely are ahead of the game than many of the developers who are still trying to do their day job and trying to make their money. And maybe some of us are like consultants, but they're not going anywhere outside writing code, because I'm not excellent or very good at writing doing marketing and sales like you're doing. This is a very good marketing and sales pitch, isn't it?
The interesting thing, Manny, right after us, we're going to have Tetiani she's VP of marketing from Jelastic, right? So that's exactly the discussion we're going to have immediately after you.
Right. Okay. I see. All right.
So how you can get those skills, right? But look, let me start with a question then. No, you are a freelancer also, right? So how do you look, what I think is that every developer should be an independent freelancer, right?
Yep.
Maybe not every, but
many can be. Yeah,
many, because look, as developers, we are always looking for new technology. We're always looking for new stuff, right? And so the way for you to do, and lots of people get frustrated on their companies, like, my company doesn't want to move to new technology. Well, if you are an independent freelancer, right, you can still help your company and help other people. They're also doing more advanced things if you want, right? So how do you
do your own projects and do open source contributions? Yeah,
right. Exactly. So let me start with this question. So you are an independent freelancer. How do you get jobs? How does that work out for you?
So I would say you actually named it, right? Community is the word. So being a part of the London Java community, I've been helped quite a bit by a lot of the members who I know. And I've been doing this for like 4 years now. Initially, my projects came through members of the London Java community. So a big thanks to them, because I couldn't have done many of the projects without, word of mouth and introductions by them to other people in the industry who would then give me projects to do on a short-term or a long-term basis. And many of them were around the Java JVM space. And that's how you start off. And I think without a community, freelancers may have to depend on agencies, recruiters, and sometimes you may not want to work with them because they may not speak the same language as community members do, right? The community members know what you do, what you're like, what needs to be done, how it needs to be done. A recruitment service or an agency, although they might be very good at collecting projects and connecting the two parties together, they may not speak the same language. They may not bring the same projects. They might bring you run of the mill projects and mundane and boring projects. I mean, of course, boring for somebody, interesting for somebody else. But you get the gist, right?
Right.
But you got to have bridges in all directions when you're a freelancer. You can't say you're better than the other person. So you got to be friends with everybody. And when you're in the community, then that expands even more because people get to know about you. And that's how I started. So 4 odd years ago, I quit my permanent role, and I thought I was too stuck in what I was doing with what at that time because I didn't have the freedom, just like you explained, right? Frustration, and so I thought I want to do something on my own, make my own calls, because as a freelancer, you make your own calls, your own boss, of course, with responsibility, and with power comes responsibility, right? So
Right.
that kind of balance needs to be there. So it has been so all this while, and then spreading my work over social media, writing blog posts, presenting, being on review committees like the one we've been doing for the last 4 weeks, the TDC Connection, and presenting at events of people I already know and also people I don't know. Like I've got a lot of invites coming from people. They say, "Hey, can you come and talk to our event?" And I've had this year as well, last year as well, and depending on my time, I kind of do it or not. And those kinds of connections also bring in work, also bring in projects, also bring in. They not necessarily have to be paid projects. Sometimes like open source freelance projects that you could do, or in between where an open source project turns into a paid project. And so in a nutshell, it's the community where all of my personal projects have come through. And again, through community, I got to know good recruitment services and good project gatherers, and they have brought in some projects as well. So it's a mix of the two.
That's awesome, man. And so for you start here by saying that you're not very good at marketing, right? But you're awesome at that, right? So that's exactly the way you do it. So you're doing it awesome.
It's not as subtle. It's not as subtle like some people, for example, yourself does marketing. Like this had to be more verbal and demonstrative, and I had to be on this session to explain to you how I get my stuff done. But it looks like you do it a lot more subtly, and many others as well. So I'm still getting there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to give you my book then, right? I wrote a book exactly about that, right?
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you.
To help technical people to be able to do this kind of thing. So I'm gonna say,
right.
how about if I do this? How about if I give this book to everyone, right? So let me just kind of get here. I'm just gonna put here in the chat. Well, I'll put in the chat. While you answer the next question, I'm gonna put in the chat here a link to my book so everyone can get that. It's called 12 Steps to Create Unique Products, right? So that might help you out. Okay, so Manny. Now, one thing that we have that we are always discussing here. I mean, we talk about new technologies and working with new technologies, kind of things. And one of the top new technology that everyone is interested about is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all this good stuff. So you are one of the world's, in the Java world, one of the leaders of this artificial intelligence machine learning thing. You're actually even the coordinator of an artificial intelligence track next week. So how do developers, especially Java developers, get into that world?
So, firstly, I didn't know I was the leader in the Java community for AI, and that's quite a compliment to hear. But I'll take that. To answer your question, is how does a Java developer get into it? So, one of the things is a Java developer has to understand that they are no longer just a Java developer. They are a polyglot developer. They no longer write code on the JVM, because even on the JVM, you write code not just in Java. You could write code in other flavors of JVM languages. And then not just that, with new technologies like GraalVM, now you can write non-JVM languages and compile them and run them on the GraalVM platform using that has been built using the Truffle framework. But apart from that, when we work on Java projects, they're not only built and developed and deployed using Java and Java technologies. There are lots of other hand-holding technologies along the line, all the way from your desktop or your laptop, all the way to the CI/CD system and into the cloud where the applications developed, deployed. And so along the way, there are lots of small pieces of technology that help package that piece of software they've written, test it, code coverage, do all the stress testing, do all the building and packaging, and then put it and deploy it in a state that the end user can access it. And Java plays a role in many of those places, but there are lots of places where you'll have non-Java technologies as well, and you'll have to write a script in a language or in a shell script, or do something in JavaScript or Node.js, or in Ruby, or do something in Python. And along the way, you're writing lots of different languages in lots of different scripts and lots of different code in lots of different languages. So you're no longer just a Java developer, you are a polyglot developer. So that's one of the barriers we want to understand and overcome, because a lot of times we want all our tooling available in the Java world. And at the moment, the way it stands, the AI world is dominated by Python, R, MATLAB, and those flavors of languages that have been thriving and growing in the AI community for the last decade, or maybe a bit less than that. And so we might want to understand that we have to start embracing those barriers and come out of the Java JVM barrier and start embracing those barriers, or they are no longer barriers, start embracing them into your ecosystem, into your thinking, into your workflow. And then, learning AI would become even more easier. That's one of the answers. The other one is you need to have a passion for it. You need to want to solve problems using it. You need to want to. So some of these things come from your own innate passion, right? There's two ways of doing it. Either you could, like a robotic manner, try to do something and become a developer. I don't know how successful you'll be, but most and all companies want to hire passionate developers. Developers who are passionate about something, passionate about solving a problem. For me, I realized that when I started learning AI, I started understanding data better. I started understanding the mathematics that I knew. I could actually understand and apply it, and the logic that I understood when I was writing code, that logic can be now formed in different ways. Like, for example, if you know AI is about rewriting all the programs from the point of view of the machine. So the machine is writing all those programs for you. The machine is manipulating the programs based on the data that it's been given, which is where machine learning comes in. And then deep learning is going even further, actually, where it's exploring the data, and then it's building inferences analysis on that, and it's building more code on top of that. So in a nutshell, if a Java developer or a developer wants to embrace into AI, is you got to find all the moot points in AI that interest you. For example, for me, nearly 20 years ago, I was excited by this simple AI program, which is actually a whole bunch of if-then statements called ELIZA. I think you might have heard of it. It was written in MIT, if I remember right. And I've actually used that in some of my demo programs even now. And there are many variants of it written in Java. In any language you think of, there's an ELIZA variant. All it's doing is if-then statements. You type in an English sentence. If it understands it, it'll give you a sensible answer, which is all hard-coded somewhere. If it doesn't understand it, it gives you one of those random answers, which it always gives. And so it makes it look like it's having a conversation with you, but actually it's talking nonsense. And I actually wrote a demo program where I make multiple different ELIZAs talk to each other. One of them running in Halidin, one of them running in Python. I can share the link here a bit later on. One of them running in Python, one of them running using another framework. There's one I'm working with where you can use the Micronaut framework. So they're all different microservices or containers running different versions of ELIZA. And they're all, some of them are just using the Java backend. The other one is using a Python version. And they're all talking to each other. They're actually sending senseless messages to each other. But if you look at the log, you see they're actually talking, and some of them are making sense. Right. Like, sometimes it doesn't understand. It'll tell you things like, can you repeat that again? Or did you say that? Or do you mean that thing that you just said? And so when it says things like that, so those are the things that interest you. So like now that's something written just with a set of if statements, and it's so interesting and it makes it look realistic. Can we take it one step further? We can, because there are now models that are not if statements, that are more complex than if statements, that can actually translate what you say or translate what you write and understand that, not just translate in another language, but understand that and respond back appropriately at many times, depending on what the domain of the model is. So that's one of the interests that I have had, coming from a country that speaks many languages.
Mm-hmm.
So NLP has been my interest. So then you want to learn machine learning and AI even more, right? Because now you want to express that ability of your Java skills or your programming skills, and then be able to do these things, which is where you put different pieces of programs and frameworks and libraries together, and you come up with a sample program that does something fun. And then you can actually build up on this further. Like for me, I like to understand series of numbers, and I have a lot of mathematical interests, which are not as advanced as some of the academia that have done with machine learning algorithms and deep learning algorithms, but they give me different perspective to my regular day-to-day data that I come across, and I'm able to then analyze it using Python tools, and eventually hopefully some Java tools, and maybe eventually hopefully all those Java tools, all those Python tools available in the Java ecosystem. So that's where my interest comes in how I have started to learn AI. So although it's a very simple one-line question, but
Mm-hmm.
I had to expand on it to give you the different angles, because otherwise it doesn't do justice to the question.
Right. No, that's great. So now you just mentioned about Python and Java and use all the Python things inside the Java world. There's a question here from LinkedIn from
Mhm.
Carlos, and he asks is Java suited for AI? Isn't it only Python? So what do you tell about
So
that?
we got to understand, a programming language is a tool. Yes, there are some tools specifically suited for some things, and there are some tools specifically suited for other things. And
Mm-hmm.
there are still some tools that can be used for other things, and we may get good results, or we may not get good results. So, yes, most of the libraries in the AI world and machine learning world, deep learning world, are written in Python, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's more available. I wouldn't say because it is more suited. A language is a language, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
course, we can argue about it because Python is a lot more succinct. You can get things done much quicker, and you can prototype and express your ideas quicker and get to production really quick. But when it really comes to productionizing a system, then you need more solid, reliable, scalable tools. I actually
Right.
gave an interview a couple of weeks ago, which got published. I don't know if you see my Twitter feed, you'll see I've given answers to these questions in a way like which explains what you're just asking me about. So you need more solid, reliable tools. And
Mm-hmm.
Java is a tried and tested, they say battle tested tool, which can cover all those tick marks. So depending on which end, what you're trying to do, right? And as I mentioned earlier, we no longer in the world of Java or JVM languages. Today, with Graal VM and technologies like that and Truffle, we are able to run non-JVM language like Graal Python is
Mm-hmm.
uh, is Python, pure Python that runs on the JVM.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're still working on it. It's not ready for production in the way you want it to be to able to
Mm-hmm.
run any Python program, but you can fairly get away with many different Python applications, simple ones. And again, don't take what I'm saying literally. Go and try it out. But
Right.
point here is that a programming language is a programming language. It's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
How you mold it and where you mold. So Eliza was written in Java as well, and Eliza in Java is doing exactly the same thing Eliza in Python.
Right.
Now
Exactly.
is so how you mold the programming language makes a difference. So you could actually blend Java and Python in such a way that you'll never know, and write something and host it on a website, and it's encapsulated by a REST API. You'll never
Mm-hmm.
know what's running behind, right? Unless you're publishing, like, usually you get the signatures back, like Apache Struct or whatever the Java frameworks used to publish whenever you hit it with a curl command or something like that. But
Right.
but unless you did that, you couldn't tell if it was written Ruby, Rust, Java, or shell script, right? So
Yeah.
so so that's going to become a less and less relevant question. Although I still agree, today where we stand, Java needs to do some more work to
Mm-hmm.
become more AI compliant. But Java already is available in many other aspects in the AI pipeline that to fill in the other aspects where it's not there yet. It's not going to take time. Plus, when you're able to run Python on the JVM using Graal Python, now you could already do that using Jython, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe you want to do pure Python and all those other discussions we don't want to get into, but you want to run exactly what you've written in Python on the JVM. Then
Mm-hmm.
as Graal Python gets more and more developed, you'll be able to do that. then you no longer can say is Java suitable for AI or not, because you're running your AI program on the JVM, and it's serving you with high performance, maybe even better than the Python performance you would get.
Right. Yeah. Because I think not only performance, right, but there is this whole, you start in the beginning to mention that as a Java developer, you can't only be Java developer. You have to think about the whole development process, right?
Exactly.
And so it is it is no question that the whole, production development process, the corporate development process, like, with CI, CD and all
Yeah,
that, is way more involved in the Java world, right?
exactly.
So if you can use all of that, and also have your Python, your AI libraries in the middle of this, right? So you get a much better situation.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you no longer can say or have to think of, is this language more suited for that? No, you could still write similar programs in Java, like given all those libraries, the important ones. Now there's Tribio as well, which is an ML library that Oracle Labs are working on. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a Java variant of a machine learning library, and
Okay.
and I've given a presentation on this last year, and it actually is bringing in the best of all the worlds, or many of the worlds that now are existing in Python. But
Mm-hmm.
wait till it gets evolved further. I mean, you could still use it now to do many things, but as it gets more evolved, you will be able to do more stuff in Java
Mm-hmm.
now, or in the coming future, than you're able to do now. And even now, you could do a lot of stuff because it's now building bridges and pipelines across a lot of the frameworks like TensorFlow, PyTorch, scikit-learn. These are the important frameworks in the AI world, in the Python community, and the Python ecosystem. But nothing stops us from building those bridges from the Java ecosystem and bringing those functionalities in. Plus, you can write your own functionalities as well, because there are lots of Java-based libraries for NLP. Now, they are not as popular because the community didn't develop around the Java ecosystem in the AI community. It developed around the Python ecosystem and the R
Right.
ecosystem and the other ones. So that's just a small difference, or a big difference, depending on which point of view you're taking the argument from. But that's how I look at it.
Okay, that's great. So I see a couple of questions here, but look, whatever you are, right? I see people watching us on YouTube, people watching us on LinkedIn. So send your questions, right? You can send your question wherever you are, and I'm gonna ask the question here from Annie. So tell us what you want to know about learning fast, getting experience fast, and artificial intelligence, and any other thing that we're discussing here. Send your questions. So Money, Mokhtar here with us says, what are the tools available, right, to apply artificial intelligence for Java developers? So could you, if someone, and Mokhtar is a student in Mohawk, right? So if someone wants to start with this, what do you say the first thing they should be doing, what the first tool they should learn?
So I have a GitHub repository where I've been gathering a lot of these tools for all kinds of
Uh-huh.
languages, especially for Java and for non-Java environments.
That's
And
awesome.
I've just pasted the link, and I would recommend going there and having a look. We've got examples as well. We've got blog posts. We've got presentations. You name it. We've got all the things that a Java developer or a developer needs to know to get started. I mean, it doesn't have all the things because the space is evolving constantly, but it has enough
Right.
starting points for you to get started. And so that's one of my Git repositories. The other one is if you want to know more about Graal related stuff, especially Graal Python, because I've been gathering a lot of resources there. And I have also blended Graal Python, not Graal Python, but Graal VM with AI and Java tools all together, and written examples and applications and blog posts and shared them. So that is a good starting point as well for someone to understand, where does Java fit in, where does AI fit in, how do I write a program, what is a program that I should write, and I have come up with some simple ideas. So I've shared the Graal Python example as well. I'll also share the chatbot example that I was talking about earlier. But if you go to my GitHub repository anyways, you will, or my GitHub organization page, you can see the different repositories I have created. And one of them being the chat conversation one. I actually used this as a demo for a couple of presentations. And You can see from the homepage of the chatbot conversations already there's a screenshot that shows the history of conversation where the Haliden framework is talking to the Roberta framework is talking to a couple of other frameworks, Quarkus, I think, as well. This is one way to get started, right? You start something simple, and then the idea is to encapsulate and make those chatbots smarter. So replace the ELIZA engine with a proper, smarter model, and then put different models around behind those different microservices. And in fact, there is another example where I actually put all of the Tribio library examples on the cloud. So you can actually, and I provided a Terraform example, so people can just run it with one line command. And of course, they need to set up Terraform and need to do a few other steps. One line command, it either runs it on a Docker container on a local machine, or it can kick off a Terraform instance that runs on the cloud. Of course, you need to have the cloud settings also saved on your local machine. And all of that is in place. And then it just goes and creates the instance. It runs the Docker container inside the instance, and it publishes a URL that you can copy from your command line, and voila, you have the notebook available, accessible from your desktop. And anybody else who has that URL at that point, because the URL has got a dynamic IP, which of course when the instance is brought down, the IP will disappear, and you can access the notebook. You can open up notebooks on that instance, and on that instance there's Graal VM running on, and a Jupyter notebook running, which talks to a Java interpreter. And then you can write Java code in the notebook, and you can execute Java code in the notebook, and all of that is shown in the example. So when you start doing things like that, you automatically start getting creative ideas on how far you can push Java.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome, man. And you have all those amazing material here, and then you ask me if that you're not one of the leaders, right? Yeah, come on, man. That's great.
So there might be other people who are doing this and sitting in the quiet, right? So,
yeah, that's good. Yeah, someone
or maybe doing better than this and sitting in the quiet, because developers can be quite introverted as well. So
yes, I understand. Yeah, someone has to say things. So let me ask one very specific things, right? So every time we talk about artificial intelligence, every time we talk anything about this, there's all this discussion that you just had about notebooks, right? So can you explain to us what a notebook is and why is that important? Because it's every machine learning discussion has that.
Sure. Yeah. So a notebook is now becoming or have become the de facto interface for data scientists and machine learning engineers and anybody working in that space to get started prototyping an example or an idea or even an office project and test it and try it out before you productionize it. And a lot of people actually productionizes a notebook as well, which is not the thing to do. I won't recommend it, but people can go and do that as well. But a notebook, and I've spoken about this in a couple of my presentations, is a fusion of your traditional way of programming and REPL-based programming and taking it slightly to the next level. So the way a notebook works is you get a JavaScript. Well, you don't know it's JavaScript, but it's JavaScript in the background. You get a page like a Word doc or a Google doc, and you get cells. Inside the cell, you can write a command or write a script or a block of code. And before that, you connect your notebook to an engine or an interpreter, and that interpreter engine is the language in which you're going to be writing code in that notebook. So you could select a Java engine or on Python or whatever is available for the notebook environment. And Jupyter supports a whole range of languages today. And so a notebook is nothing but a Google Doc-like interface where you can write blocks of code, you can execute the blocks of code, and the results of the execution of blocks of code are shown right underneath. So you can now already hear me talking about REPL-based programming, because this is exactly what in a REPL, you're familiar with the Java REPL. This is exactly what we do. We have history of commands we can save all the script, we can get the outputs, we can save the outputs, we can do a whole lot of stuff. But a REPL-based programming is slightly less sophisticated, because it does not allow you to save all your outputs and your code one beneath the other into a text file or wherever, onto some kind of a rich formatted file, and then load it back again. You could load your code snippets back again, but I don't think you can load your outputs back again, right? So there is that fight there. And in a traditional way of programming, what is it? You have an IDE, you have a command line, or both, because in IntelliJ you can have the CLI just built into the IDE, and you can put in your commands there and you run your build scripts either through the menu options or through a single line command. I'm used to the command line interface, so I always use the command line to run my build and run. And what happens is you write your code. You only run your code when you finished writing your code completely, and you execute it, and the output is now devoid or detached from the code, right? And you can now save your output, but they'll be like one beneath the other, right? What if you want the output of each block of code that you have in your function or class? Of course, that's a different discussion on its own. You can do that, right? People ask, what would you want to do that? But that's what REPL-based programming is, right? You write blocks of code and you check it out, how it works. You use the results from the previous execution into your next. Now, when you blend the two together, your traditional programming and your REPL-based programming, there you get the notebook where you can do both. And you can run the whole notebook. It'll run all of the code snippets, or you can run random pieces of code. Of course, some code may depend on previous cells, so you have to run them. But you can also write pieces of code that are independent of each other. You can run the whole notebook. It executes the whole notebook and executes all the code. And the outputs are available just beneath each of the code snippets. And then you can save the notebook. And I can send you the notebook. You don't need to run the notebook. You can just look at the notebook and say, this is the output. Of course, if you run the notebook, then the outputs are wiped out. Right? This is something hard to do in either of the traditional based programming or REPL based programming. Of course, you can find workarounds and get it, but not exactly the same way. So now you're so much more efficient. You're already getting to see the output. So all you do is you connect your interpreter with the right language. And so you can have multiple notebooks of different languages open in the browser. Okay, yeah, I didn't mention that. It's a browser-based interface. So you open different tabs, and in each tab you have your Jupyter notebook, so call it, or a notebook served by another program, another interface, or Apache Zeppelin has one as well. And the idea is the same. You write multiple languages in different notebooks, right? You have a Java notebook, you have a Python-based notebook, you have a R-based notebook, and they're all next to each other. And you can run the outputs in each of them separately. You couldn't do that very easily. You would have to open 3 console tabs or 3 ID interfaces. You would run them, build them, and you see the outputs in one, and you can't save it because, sometimes the outputs are not savable and all that stuff. It's complicated. In a REPL-based environment, everything is text-based. Of course, people will argue that some REPL-based environments may support graphics, but that's the other thing. In a notebook, you can also have images. So you can have graphs and pie charts and JPEG images and videos embedded in the notebook, which you cannot now do in a REPL-based or a traditional environment. So are we programming? Yeah, we are programming and producing the end result while we are beginning to write a program.
Right. So basically, complete different because it has several advantages. But the notebook would be the place where you work, right? It's like the IDE for a Java developer.
Yeah, I mean, take example of a notebook like this, right?
Right.
Now you've been given this notebook, but in a digital form, because on this notebook you can write code, you can draw pictures, you can do all kinds of other things, right? And exactly the same you're going to do in the Jupyter notebook. Now there is another. If people are familiar with Vim or Spacemacs, and there's something called Emacs as well. They are allowing you to do things like write emails, do word processing, do to-do list, and create an HTML page and very basic stuff in the IDE itself, and do Markdown. So that is slightly close to notebook, but still devoid from it. It's still not as sophisticated. And of course, the Emacs and Vim and Spacemacs users will love it, and I love it as well when I use it. But I do see the limitations when I do that, and when I use the Jupyter Notebook or Apache Zeppelin interface. Okay,
awesome, man. That's awesome. So Mokhtar has like a inflammatory question here for you, right? So he thinks that artificial intelligence, that we're killing ourselves, right? So because we're giving more control of the machines over us. But no, that's a fair question. I know it's he put in a way like killing us, but it is a fair question. Right? There's a lot of people saying that even software development, artificial intelligence is going to do more of that. So are we in risk of losing our jobs, or are we actually going to have more interesting jobs to do?
All right. So I think it's kind of a question happens at the beginning of every evolution. Like, for
Right.
example, my dad used to tell me this when they introduced computers in his office environment. This was like about, I'll be saying my age now, but over 30, 35, 40 years ago. And he said computers are bad.
Right.
They're gonna create a lot of job losses. Guess what? Computers created far too many jobs that we can't even
Right.
fill them. Right? Not just that.
Yeah.
Computers
Oh man.
introduced value services and products that we would never think of. Like, people would love printing things on a computer as opposed to on a typewriter. So that
Hmm.
what happened, it brought about the printer industry, which brought about the paper industry, which brought about the ink, which brought about the companies that serviced your printer, the companies that sold ribbons to you, that companies that sold you papers of all kinds. And the list just goes on, right? Then you have
Yeah.
a printer stand, and you have a printer table, you have furniture people, and the carpentry people building you computer sets or computer stands, and you name it. So we complained about computers killing your jobs. No, it's made your jobs a lot more efficient. But not
Right.
just that, now it has created jobs for hundreds and thousands more people, not just in your industry, but in
Right.
every connecting industry that you can think of. Think about the same answer or a similar answer for this question about AI. Yes, it is making it look like it's going to replace you, but no, it's going to replace you with a better version of you. So there's something called AI assisted human, or human assisted AI, or
Hmm.
augmented is the other word. Where you mean is we blend the two together. So either way, either the AI takes the human's help
Hmm.
to get the correctness in the results, or the human takes the AI's help to get better in whatever they produce. So those are the scenarios we will be going towards, and hence AI evolution and hence AI progress is super super important. And so, not to worry. And computers in the near future may not be able to replace many of the programs that we write. They can still only do very simple things. I'm saying simple things, but they're making advancements in there as well. But it's way way far off from writing a full-fledged productionized end-to-end system that you would write in your favorite Java framework, or your favorite Python library or framework, or any other programming language you do in. And nothing to be worried about, because there'll be so much more to do that
Right.
you may have those machines doing those things. You'll still need human beings to do other stuff that the machines cannot still do, right? So it'll abstract away the mundane, repeated, boring stuff away from you, right? The things that you make mistakes in and you always don't do very well, but replace it with all the things that the computers cannot you really have, like thinking or consciousness. I mean, of course, people are arguing about this, like creativity. People are arguing
Right.
about this. No, they can't. We can do it, but those arguments are very constrained arguments. They fit only in a small framework, right? If you look at the whole argument and the big picture, they don't hold water. They can't stand. They don't have the ground to stand yet. And this will change, but every time it changes, humans get the next thing to do that computers are still not good at doing, right? So that's where human augmented AI, or AI augmented human, is where we are going, and not humans controlled by AI and enslaved by AI, which is again the similar thinking that we had. Computers are bad. They're going to take away our jobs. Look at what it has done. The computer industry is one of the most how do you say industry with a lot of demand for professionals, and they're still not able to fill up all the professional
Right. And
spaces.
impacted everyone else, right? I think that if you
Exactly.
take a look in terms of what the computer industry did, right? It
Mhm.
made it made restaurants better. It made
Exactly.
travel better. It
Yeah.
made it made everything else works better, right? It made agriculture better, right? So everything else is better and more productive
Yeah.
and more
Exactly.
needs more people, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, because of the computer. And that's exactly what I think about AI. And that's great. That was awesome answer that you gave right there.
Yeah, and it's made things more reliable and consistent, right? Like, how reliable and consistent is a human being, and how biased is a human being, or unbiased is a computer, right?
Right.
So those are the things important to take care of. Like, if you, I mean, of course, you're not going to make a computer do certain things that you don't want it to, but given within reasons, if you, for example, have a code review to do, and you give a bunch of human beings to do it, you'll get different answers. But if you give a computer that's trained with the right logic to understand the code and give you the right output, for every person's code review, the answers would be consistent in a semantic way, right? will be semantically similar but consistent, yet it'll be different and customized for each person because of the code they've written. And the computer is going to be doing it tirelessly and at scale, and humans are going to fail at doing that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, man, we're getting here to the top of the hour. So, Manny, let me ask you one thing.
Sure.
So, is there anything that I should have asked you, that I did not, that you want to talk about?
Whoa. That's $1 million one question, I think.
Oh, yes, exactly.
You could have asked me a lot of stuff, but I don't know if I would have had answers to many of those stuff. But I think you asked the right questions.
So let me ask one more question here that I think is important, right? So, I like to discuss a lot these skills, right? A lot of people want to discuss the knowledge, but I love the fact that you're very practical. You talk about lots of very, very practical things. So, if you would suggest like one important skill for people to get into the artificial intelligence or thing like that, besides coming to your track on TDC next week, right? What else could people do? Like, what is this skill that people could have, could focus on to really enter in this area?
So one of the skills, and this is not just for Java developers, this is for developers and also for people in the technical industry. And I'm actually been working on it for quite some time. So I'm not saying I have the skill, but I'm still working on the skill called pragmatism. And once we develop that skill, and once we start getting to develop that skill, once we start getting to know that skill, then we will see that we see the world in a very different way. We will not see the problems like they are. We will not create the problems that a lot of our engineers might be unknowingly doing it. Because, when you don't know about it, you end up doing it. And I've been there in that space. And to avoid yourself from doing something like this, you start developing practicality and pragmatism. So the practicality comes from pragmatism, right? What is needed now? What is the best thing needed now? How can I develop it first, make it work first, make it look nice later, but before that, make it scalable and performant so that people can use it. Then come back to make it look better, and then go back to again how to make it work again for the next thing, and then keep incrementally doing this as a thinking, as opposed to what we do is we make it look nice. We spend a lot of time trying to make it nice. Then we next is like to make it fast and efficient, performance. And then we struggle on trying to make it work, right? So that's the wrong approach. And that's the bottom up approach, I say, bottom out approach, where you got to want to take the top down approach.
Yeah, and I think this is very valid for everything that we're going to do, right? Kind of be very practical.
Exactly.
Lots of people want to learn, and never do anything practical. So I love this. I love your practical approach, and I think that's what makes you an awesome freelancer, right? Because focus on the practical things. There's one thing you said here that I just want to point out for everyone, because I thought it was like gold when you mentioned that. You said that you have to find a problem to solve, right? So I really love that. Once you find a problem to solve, and you do it practically, right? Then you can change the world just by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the simple example could be the chatbot conversation. I just had an idea like, hey, what if I make all the chatbots talk to each other? But how am I going to do that? Okay, actually, it's very simple, right? Make each of them make a REST call to the other one. Okay, how do I do that? I kick off a multiple servers. I kick off 2 servers first, right? And then I let them find each other through scanning the ports, or I just hard code the ports. And then they find each other, and then they send a message to each other, and then they take the message and they send it to the engine behind them, and the engine interprets the message and sends it back, and they have nothing to do. They just send the message back to each other, and they can go in a round robin fashion forever. And then you introduce another server in the loop, and then when you introduce the 4th server, you have another problem that you need to solve, which I haven't solved yet. But that's how you end up, and then you become more creative, right? You replace the engines with, like, I had Eliza everywhere first, then I replaced Eliza with different versions of Eliza. And then I replaced one of the engines with a Python engine, and I replaced it with a NLP model attached to it. And so what problem have I solved there? I have begun to start solving a problem, not yet, but there are certain problems that I've already solved there, right? Running microservices that talk to each other, replacing your microservice, making your microservices such that they talk to models that do the work and not the microservice. The microservice just being the interface. And then making it run on the cloud. And when you have a simple, and making it run on like, say, Oracle Cloud, which is where I've done using the Terraform solution. So those things solve an end-to-end problem. And
Right.
then those are building blocks. You can replace all of that with anything else, right? Once you have the whole script in
Cool.
place, you can replace your microservices not doing NLP or ELIZA or chatting to each other, but actually doing practical stuff like, inventory control or taking requests from customers or doing something else. And then they're still talking to each other, and then maybe introduce a queue from which they can talk to each other instead of talking to each other by sending messages to each other. Send a message to one central place. So that's the next problem to solve. And then you've built something that is useful. What was the problem you're trying to solve? Maybe not. Maybe you're just trying to learn in this case, right? But you did indirectly solve the problem of queues, of peer-to-peer communication, including microservices, and
Right.
running it on the cloud, and running it inside a Docker container.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, Manny, Tatiana Fidorenk is already here, but I really like to answer every single question. So there's one from Andrews. He says,
Yeah.
what can you say about deep learning? So is that deep learning something that we all should learn?
So deep learning is the next step further, where you're doing a bit less than you would be doing, and you're giving the algorithm or the machine the power to go and analyze the data and construct the program from it, or analyze the data and create the features from the data. And it may or may not tell you what those features are, but it'll give you inferences based on that model that it has created. So it's a hard question to answer. It's solving a lot of problems these days, but it's also a big black box. So it's non-explainable. So there's pros and cons. So whatever you do through deep learning, you may get results, but you might not be able to explain why the results came about. And everybody's deep learning model will answer something differently. And the writers and creators of the deep learning algorithms themselves sometimes are baffled on how to explain how my model or how my algorithm actually came up with this answer, because it's complicated mathematical inferences, and it's a lot of it is statistical in nature. And then when statistics gets deep, because it compresses numbers or a large series of numbers into smaller numbers, now the information is lost. And there's a lot of assumptions also that's taking place in the whole algorithm. Again, I'm not talking about every algorithm, but the general idea is, because those assumptions, we are thinking, well, because of this, we'll do this and we'll do this. We'll assume this. So they're coming up with an answer. A lot of times, probabilistically, are the right answers. A lot of times are unexplainable. And I'm not going to say they're wrong answers. Again, those are subjective, but they can be wrong answers as well. And then you cannot explain why the answer was wrong.
Okay. Right. That's awesome, man. That's great. So, before we finish this here, let me just kind of say, because we're talking about machine learning here, let me just give a book for everyone about machine learning. So a guy that's working with you, right, on the TDC track next week, Eyal Wirshan, right? So Eyal wrote this little book here. It's a tiny little book to help developers get started, right? It's called the Low Hanging Machine Learning Book, right? So if anyone is interested about that book, it's on this URL here. There's 5 there's 5 books here from different people. I'm going to talk with Scott this afternoon, right? So if you want to do refactoring, Scott's going to talk about it here this afternoon. Let me just mention here that Rafael Del Nero, we are actually streaming all of this here to Rafael Del Nero a YouTube account. So thanks a lot, Rafael, for spreading this message even more. And Eyal wrote this little low-hanging machine learning book with a few tools, right? 6 concepts and 3 tools that you can apply today in your project. Right? So if you want to do that, low-hanging books, that's the URL for you to get. So, Manny, thanks so much, man, for being here with us. Thanks so much for taking time from your busy day and showing up here. And, man, that was totally awesome. I learned a lot, and hopefully everyone enjoyed.
Thank you very much for having me here as well. Likewise.
Okay, so I see you next week, right?
Yes, I will see you next week.
All right. Okay, so
see you around.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Manny. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone. We're going to end this session now. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to be back here with Tatiana Fidorenki. She's the VP of Marketing from Jelastic. And she's going to talk about how you can get marketing skills to do exactly what Manny's talking about, right? To grow your career. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Manny.